Hey friends, in this video we will see how to develop an SDK with TypeScript. First, what is an SDK? SDK is a software development kit that allows you to build different apps for different platforms. It makes it easier to run your code and it abstracts all the specifics of your API and let the developers using your API follow some common patterns that are more familiar to them. What this means is, let's say you have to interact with the third-party APIs. If there was no SDK, then you would have to write the HTTP client, manage all the authentication, do the error handling, and so on. Having an SDK provides a better developer experience and it allows the developers to use your API in a right way. In this video, we will build a SDK for the JSON placeholder. Now, JSON placeholder is a fake HTTP server that provides various endpoints related to posts, comments, users, etc. So, we will develop an SDK that allows the users to interact with the posts API. Without wasting much time, let's get started. Okay, so I have my VS Code open. We will create a npm project. So let me just create the SDK demo folder. I will cd into it and initialize my project. Once I initialize, it will create a package.json. Okay, so we can add the respective details into our package.json like the name, the main file, scripts, license, etc. So we will be using a library called microbundle. So microbundle allows you to create a library in multiple formats like CommonJS, ESM, UMD, etc. So what we will do is we will install that package. In order to install that package, I can do an npm install microbundle with save dev. So it's a dev dependency. Okay, so this will take a few seconds to install. Great. So once that is installed, what we can do is we can add the necessary details to our package.json. So once we bundle or once we build our package, it will create the index.js in the dist folder. At the same time, we need to add the other options like module. The module will be present in dist index.m.js. One package, which is the UMD, will be under dist index.umd.js, and at the same time we will also define types which will be present in index.d.ts. Okay, in addition to that, we will add few scripts here. So we will remove the test, we will add a build which will do nothing but clear the existing dist and call microbundle tsconfig.json, which we will be creating in a minute, and with no source map. Okay, so this is what we need. So what we will do is we will create the tsconfig. So in order to create tsconfig, what you can do is you can give tsc --init. This would create huge file which we don't need. So what I will do is I'll clean this up and I'll replace this with what we have. Okay, so let me copy it from the machine so that we save some time. Okay, so I have copied the tsconfig.json here. So once I have created the tsconfig.json, we can get started writing our SDK. So before we write the SDK, let us just look at the tsconfig.json. What it says is look for all the files under the source directory. Okay, so we need to create an src folder, and within src folder we will be creating few files. We will be following a modular approach. So what can happen is an SDK could be to support various kinds of APIs like posts, users, comments, etc. So we will keep their files under respective folders. So we will create a folder called posts. Okay, and within the posts we will have files called index.txt. Okay, so we will implement this in a bit. So before that, what we will do is in the src we will create index.ts, and at the same time we will also be creating a file called base.ts. Now this base.ts is an important file, and all our implementations like posts, users will extend this base, which provides the common functionality. Okay, so the common functionality could be like defining the headers, creating an instance, etc. Okay, so let's get that started. So what I will do is I will have a type called config. This could be basically the options that are needed in order to initialize our SDK. So usually what happens is in order to interact with the APIs, you will need to have API keys, you will need to have some kind of authorization and some additional details. So those data we can abstract using this config type. Okay, so what I will do is I will call it API key and I'll name it string. Okay, and the other options could be base URL. Could be optional because we can have a default URL which could point to our production server. Okay, so once we have this type config, what we will do is we will export class base. Now we can make this class as an abstract. Okay, and within this we will have a constructor. Okay, and the constructor will take in this config, which is of type config. Okay, so we can define the two variables here, API key, which is a string, and private base URL, which is also a string. And within this constructor we can set it. Okay, so this could be if base URL is provided, then use it, else it could be pointing to the JSON placeholder which we saw some time back. Okay, great. So once this is done, what we will do is we will create a method called request, which will help us to interact with this endpoints with different method types like get, post, put, delete. So for that we will use an package called isomorphic unfetch. This is one of the good libraries which supports both client side as well as server side. So what we will do is we will go and install it. The npm install isomorphic unfetch, and this will be a dependency. Great. So once that is installed, what we will do is create a method called invoke, and we will use generics. This T could be hosts, users, or any other collections that we have. This will take in an endpoint, which is a string, and it will take options, which is of type request init, and it will return a promise of that type. Okay, so here what we will do is we will create a URL, which is a base URL and endpoint. Then we will create headers. Okay, the headers will have content type, and it will have this API key which we just had. In this example, we will not be needing an API key, but I just want to show how it can be used, because in most of your SDKs there will be API key that needs to be used in order to interact. Okay, so I'll create a config option here, which I will sparse this options, and at the same time I will also add the headers into it. Great. So once this is done, it is simple. So I do a return fetch URL and pass this config. Okay, so since this is a promise, we can use response. So what I will do is here, if response is okay, I will return response.json. Else I will throw an error, let's say with response.status text. Great. So with this, our base class is complete. What we will do next is we will go and implement the post method. Okay, so the post method is very simple. So what we need to do is we need to provide the functions here. Okay, so for that I will first import. Okay, we don't need to import anything as of now. So what we will do is export class posts. It should extend base. Okay, so we will import this base which we created a few minutes back, and within this I will be having methods. So let's say our first method is get post by ID. So this will take an ID which is number. It will return a promise of post. So now we need to define what this post looks like. So what we will do is we will create types.ts, and here we will define that. So what we will do is export declare type post equal to, and here we will define what it is. So it will have ID which is a number, it will have title which is a string, body which is a string, and user ID which is a number. Okay, so once I have this, I will go to my post and let me import it. Great. And within this we just need to return this dot invoke slash post slash ID. So basically what this invoke will do is it will append this to the base URL and then return back the response. Okay, now the next method could be get posts. Okay, so this get post will not take anything and it will return an array. So we can do return dot this dot invoke, pass the endpoint as post. That's it. Now if you notice here, this post we are using a lot of time. So what we could do is we could abstract it to a constant. So what I will do is I'll create a constant called resource and I will call it post. Okay, and here I will use that variable. Similarly here. Okay, good. Now this both is get. So let's create one called new post. Create post. Now create post should take some kind of a variable. So before that we will go and define the type for that. So export declare type new post, and the new post will have exactly the same variables like that of the post except the ID which will be generated. So what I'll do is I'll copy this all, paste it here. I'll go back, create post which takes in new post which is of type new post which we just created, and it will return a promise of type post. So we do return this dot invoke, I pass in the resource and I'll need to pass some additional options which is method post and body which is stringify of the new post. That's it. So with this we have our posts ready. So we are almost there. So what we need to do is now create a mixin. So for that I will have utils.ts. Now mixin is basically used to create a single file that comprises from a partial classes. So there is a snippet that is provided in the TypeScript documentation which I will reference in my description. So what I'll do here is I will copy it from the documentation, the method, and I'll paste it here. So I'll do export and I'll paste the function. Okay, so that's all we need to do here. And the last thing is in the index.ts, we'll have to bring all of this together. Okay, so in order to get all of this together, what we need to do is we need to create a class, what it will be called. So let's call our SDK is called typecode. Okay, so this will extend base. Similarly, we'll need to create an interface as well and apply the mixin. So I'll just import everything that is needed. Next, I will have an interface with the same name which extends post. Okay, it is post and empty. So now once this is done, we need to apply the mixins. And if you see, the first is the derived which is typecode, and second is the array where we need to pass all the ones that we have, the posts, users, whatever we'll be implementing. And last we need to export default is typecode. Alright, so with this we have our SDK ready. So let's get this tested. Okay, so now let's generate the output for our SDK. So before that, let us just look at all the files once. So we have the post folder, the index.ts, we have the base.ts which includes the message function to do a fetch. Okay, so I need to add the fetch method here. Okay, from isomorphic unfetch. Okay, and then we have this ts which has this apply mixin, and in index.ts we have brought all these files together. Great. So now let us go back to our package.json. We have already added a build script here which will use the microbundle package to build our library in different formats. What we can also do is add a files keyword here which indicates that include only dist folder or the contents of the dist folder as part of the output when published to the npm registry. Okay, so now let's go and run the command. We can do npm run build. So this npm run build should create a dist folder for us, as you can see. Great. And it has created various files as we defined here, right? So it has created a index.js which is for common.js, index.m.js which is for module, asm, and umd for the umd type. Great. Now how do we test this? So we don't want to publish it to npm registry and then test. So before that we need a way where we can test it locally. So for that we can make use of npm link command. So what we will do is we will create a new folder or a new project for testing this SDK. For that what I will do is I'll go back to my terminal. Okay, so I'll go to my root. I'll create a folder called SDK test. I will cd to SDK test and initialize a npm project. Great. So once I initialized a npm project, what I will do is I will copy the ts config json because I need it here. So I'll copy it. Let me open the ts config and let's just see the different properties here. We can also add a property for ts module interrupt to true. Okay, so let's go back. It is looking for files in src folder. So let's create src folder, and within that create a file called app.ts. In this app.ts we should be able to call our methods via the SDK. For that, first we need to import or install our SDK. So since we have not published it to our npm registry, the easiest way we can test this is by using an npm link command and providing a path to that SDK. So once we do that, it should import, and as you can see in the node modules there is the SDK demo and it is having this arrow which says that it is a linked module. Great. So let's go back to our app.ts and import our TP code. Okay, so TP code should not be okay, so it's importing it from SDK demo. What we can do next is we can create a client, new TP code, and as you can see it is complaining. That's the power of TypeScript. It's saying that it's expecting one argument which is config. So let us provide this config. If you press Ctrl space, it says that there are two methods or two properties basically, API key and base URL, which is optional. So we'll just supply API key, say 123. And now on this client object, you can see it has three methods: create post, get post by ID, and get post. So let us use get post. It doesn't take anything, and since it returns a promise, I can do .then, and here I can access posts and I can do any business logic. So for now I will just do console.log. Great. So let us see whether it works. Fingers crossed. So I will run TSE. It compiled successfully and it has created a JS file here. So what we can do is node-app.js. Okay, so it is giving a error saying that SDK demo 1 default is not a constructor. Okay, so for that it is because of property that we need to supply called ES module interop, and we will set it to true. Once we do that, let us run TSE again, which will compile, and once compiled I can do node paste app.js. Great, and if you see, we have got the output. So using the SDK, which has contacted the JSON placeholder and written the necessary output. So we can test this for the other as well. So what I can do is I can just duplicate this, and instead of get post I'll use get post by ID, and we'll pass some post ID that is 1. We'll comment this, compile, and do node-app.js, and if you see, it just returns that particular post. Perfect. So similarly, we can also test our last method, which is create. So client.create post. Create post takes a new post. So what you could do is you could pass it here, title, body, user ID, and since this also returns a promise, I can do .then, or I can use await, and within then what I can do is I can access that output and I can print new post is created with, and do p.id, because it is returning p is post and post as ID, which needs to be auto generated. Great, so I can compile and run, and as you can see, new post is created with 101. So with this, our SDK is all set, and now the only thing that is remaining is publishing this to npm, and that's pretty simple. What you can do is you can go to your SDK demo. Okay, you can go to the SDK demo and you can do npm publish access equal to public. Okay, so for that what we could do is let me create that as a scope. Basically it's not necessary though, but let me just do it for simplicity. So what I'll do is I'll scope it against my user. Okay, I will have it as 1.0.0, that's fine, and I'll do npm run build so that it can just create it again. Okay, so once that is done, I can do a publish. I can do npm publish -- access equal to public. Okay, so cannot publish over previously published version. Okay, I believe I had already published this with the previous version. So what I will do is I'll just keep some .6 and I'll try to publish it. Great. As you can see, this SDK demo is now published with version 1.0.6. So what we will do is we'll go back to our SDK test, and in SDK test we had node modules which was using the linked option. So what we will do is we will delete it, and even in the package.json here, okay, it didn't have anything. I believe that is perfect. So what we will do is we will do npm install @durgadas SDK demo. This will now bring our package from the npm registry, as you can see, @durgadas, and then we have this dist. Okay, and if you see here, we don't have that src folder because in the files we had listed only the contents of dist to be published. Okay, so I can go back to my src app.ts. We just need to change this because we have changed the package name. Okay, we'll just do tsc and we can run. And that's it. So with this, we have our SDK, which is interacting with the JSON placeholder API, and it's published to npm as well. That's it. If this was really helpful, please do give a like and subscribe to my channel for further updates. Till then, happy learning.